So today was Yud Aleph Shvat. Shabbos was 11th of Shvat, which is the 1-year Yahrtzeit of Daniella Lee-Casper. So I spoke to you about Daniella during the week when I had all of you together in class. Today was her Yahrtzeit. So this evening, the Melave Malka, the learning that we're doing, and the inspiration that we should have for Hashem in the evening. It should be Lee-Casper, Daniella Sheina, Yehoshua Falik, Shalom, Daniella Lee-Casper, who was after 1 year ago today. So, like I told you when we spoke in class, Daniella was a very special person, a very unique person, extremely dedicated individual, and like I said also that to a large extent the impact that she's had has been more so after her Ketira in terms of many people taking on mitzvos. Daniella. There was a big movement in NCSY. A lot of people last year were involved, and there's a few websites that are set up. That's one of the things I just really wanted to bring to your attention. There's a website in memory of Daniella.com. There's it's written up on the sheet inside there where the sign-in page is, and they have over there a section where you can sign in and say a mitzvah that you would like to take on the Yehoshua Daniella. A mitzvah, something that you're doing, a tiny thing, no matter how small a thing to do in the memory of Daniella, the Yehoshua Daniella. So I'd like to ask you, I know it's something that is, I feel it, I'll say, or Rabbi Menachem Nissel, when it does two things. And number one, it gives kavod to the mace, it gives kavod, it gives honor to the nifter, but it also brings comfort to the family, and it brings, it brings a sense of comfort to them, a sense of meaning, and this is something that's very meaningful to the family when they see that there are people, especially like most of you in the room, who never knew Daniella, who only heard of her, and are inspired by her example, and inspired by who she was, and the type of life that she led, and therefore are motivated to push yourself a little bit more in avodas Hashem and sign up. And even if you don't want to say what the mitzvah is, some people sign up, they say, I'd rather not say, but I'm telling you something that's very meaningful, very powerful. It's powerful for yourself that you're doing something that, concrete to say, I want to do something to, give this close to this, incredible young woman. And it's something very concrete that the family sees, that there are people that are still affected by Daniella. So the sign is over there. I really would encourage you, to please, after tonight, to think about it and, to put your name down there. And more importantly, to do the mitzvah and to think, what you're doing. Like I said to you, Daniella was a girl who like this, was sitting right here in this room the first day of school, in the chair set up like this. She was a person that we kept in touch with over the years. Like I mentioned to you, she did chesed by us. And at the end of the year, she made us this photo album. And it's just a picture of you. There's a scholar just walked in, so there's pictures of you in here. The picture of Tova in here, and this picture of the kid is like such a sweet, meaningful thing that she did for us at the end of her year. It happens to go with the colors that we that Shashi picked for the night. Also, I just thought I want to put it on the table. It looks like it was not meant to be over there. So this is going to be sitting over there on the table, tonight afterwards. I would invite you just to take a look at it and just to see, see that you get an idea of the picture of the radiant neshama that Daniella was. Incredibly special person, and. Okay, I would like to introduce Rabbi Nissel to speak. Rabbi Nissel, somebody who's had charities with us, hostess with the Tomer Devorah for many years, and somebody who's come to the school to speak a lot of times, a very close friend of the school, and it's a comfort for us to come and to hear him speak and to talk about a difficult topic. There's a whole list of topics Rabbi Nissel could speak about, but I picked the topic that I thought would be appropriate, which is the question of why tefillot aren't answered. Why is it that sometimes we dive in and we ask Hashem for things and we feel that we don't get an answer? And I felt that was an appropriate topic to discuss because Daniella's Ketira was something that raised so many questions for so many people, so many questions in Emunah and difficulties and how could such a thing happen? And I felt it was an appropriate topic to discuss in this context. So to ask you, please again, the hearing should be the Daniella Sheina.
The day after the terrible tragedy that happened in Ramot, just a short while ago, I found myself in a place called Miami, Florida. And for some reason, the word got out wasn't actually for some reason. Rabbi Nissel Senior told the press, and they told him that there is a young man who's actually prays in that synagogue, who's close friends with the people that got murdered, and he's here in South Florida. You can interview him. So I became a media celebrity. It was a little bit strange for me. They all descended on the Lurfield home in North Miami Beach. And they all asked me the same question. So did you think of revenge? What do you think about? What exactly is going on in your mind now? What do you want to do to respond? And I'm thinking to myself, there is no way you can ever explain to these people what a kenes hysteris is all about. In other words, if I would tell them, yeah, well, we're going to get together, and some rabbi is going to tell us about taking upon themselves small mitzvahs, and they would think we are insane. They want to know, do we want to go into some Arab village and kill them? What exactly is in our mind? But this is not the way that we work. We have a totally different approach to when Hashem brings tragedy into our community. We have very specific ideas of what happens. Another point that I want to make right now is that we know that Klal Yisrael is a nation, Klal Yisrael has tribes, Klal Yisrael has families, but the Talmud tells us Klal Yisrael has what's called a chabura. Chabura means there are people that are connected through a specific form of inspiration. And when somebody dies from that chabura, then basically everyone else in the chabura has to ask themselves, what does this mean for me? And Daniella, from my viewpoint, was part of two chaburas. One was NCSY, that's why I knew her through, I'm embarrassed to say we were Facebook friends. And so I knew her through the NCSY family and through Tomer Devorah, which is, even though unfortunately I did not teach it, and I say unfortunately it's a very, very beloved school. It's an incredible school that you have here with awesome teachers. I don't know about awesome teachers, but I know they're awesome from Hala. Rabbi Fixer, Rabbi Rosenstein, you have to supposed to be part of this. And when a tragedy hits the chabura, in this case the school, or some of you know what from NCSY, you have to ask yourself, Hashem is talking to me, and what's the small, teeny little thing that I'm supposed to be doing to fit in over here? So tonight we're letting clear, this Rabbi Rosenstein said, the goal is to make us stop and think for one moment of that teeny little extra that we can do in memory of a very beloved and very wonderful neshama that studied right here in this room. She was part of this chabura, and let's think what we can do, that little teeny extra in her memory. The story of prayer begins where? So you can answer this question many different ways. But one of the ways you can answer is, where do we find in the Chumash the first explicit parsha of prayer? In other words, we know that the Midrashim say that Adam prayed, Adam Rishon prayed, Noah prayed, but where do we find actually a story of tefillot appearing in the narrative of the Chumash? And it's a hard question to answer because most people don't get it. I mean, anyone want to go for it? It's with Avram Avinu, but what was the context? Who said that? Okay, very good. Okay, most people don't get that. Most people say the Akedah, was it this, the children? They get it, and you see the answer is Avram Avinu davening for those cuddly, affable, lovable citizens of stone. I don't want you to lose your appetite, but when you read about what Sodomites used to do, I mean, they gave, just to give you a little bit of sense of who stone was all about, my daughter, who's now married, when she was in kindergarten, she came in one day and said, Abba, you'll never guess what they taught us today in school about stone. I said, uh-oh, they used to take little girlies and cover them with honey and throw them into beehives, and they used to get stung to death. Isn't that cool? I said, oh my gosh, this is like, already kindergarten teachers with problems. They let it out on the kids, and so the book, she wasn't traumatized. All she saw was the most amazing thing, and I'm thinking, this is crazy. Avram Avinu cares about Sodomites. That's what he cares about. So why should he care about these people? I think it's wonderful they should all die. What exactly is Avram Avinu getting up and davening on behalf of stone? What do you like to suggest? I'm sorry to make this interactive. I know you just want me to speak. Go Ms. Lieberman from Manchester.
Maybe it was giving them a chance to do tefillot.
In other words, correct. See?
A
Okay, so the answer is, Avraham Avinu has a different way of looking at the world. He sees that the purpose of life is to try and inspire people. And he wants to go and open up a Tomer Devorah NCSY branch in stone and bring them to Tshuva. He says if they die with their sins, a tremendous call Hashem. Nothing will be gained out of that. Their sins are allowed to fester in that place. But let me go in, let me make them do tshuva, give me a chance to make them to a better place. Typical Avraham Avinu. He sees the goodness and opportunity in everyone, and he wants to go and say, excellent, very good. Okay, so by the way, she's from England. In case you don't know, so am I. So she's probably a Manchester United fan from the family. Anyhow, the point is, that's the way it's supposed to be. Avraham Avinu wants to save the Sodomites. Let's see what happens over here. I'm reading to you voracious, good test, before I tell you exactly what I'm about to read to you, I just want to add one more point. That since this is the first parsha of tefillah, it is going to be the essence of what tefillah is all about. And everything you need to know about tefillah can be found in the next few words. And we're going to learn, I'm just going to give you a sneak preview, that this is going to be the foundation of what's called chakras. And we're also going to learn that Avraham Avinu, not only is he going to be davening the first chakras in history, right there on behalf of the Sodomites, but Maral in Prague has a whole essay explaining, which we're not going to go into now, explaining that this first chakras wasn't just a first tefillah. Basically, he was creating what the Maral basically calls chakras power. What does chakras power mean? Tomorrow morning you daven chakras, you're plugging in to this first tefillah. To give you an example, you have a look at all the lights that are on. You have a look over here that there are various machines that are plugged in. Somewhere out there, there's this massive generator that is providing electricity to all of Israel. Actually, probably all of Jerusalem, all of Yerushalayim. The power generators. And we plug in, and we take use of it, and then we go use it for our own little purposes, for whatever we want to do. Avraham Avinu is creating that powerful generator, so that every single chakras, until the end of time, gets its energy, gets its strength from this first tefillah. So this is the first parsha. This is the foundation parsha. This has in it the secret of chakras. This has in it the secret of prayer. This has in it everything we need to know about tefillah. You ready for this? Ladies, Sleepman, you ready? Can we do this? Let's read. Genesis, voracious, Perikutes, Pasuk Havzayin. Vayashkein Avram Baboga. The word Vayashkein means the crack of dawn. So the perfect time to daven chakras is tomorrow morning. Ladies, you should all get up early and make sure you read the Shemona Esrei by approximately 6:30. It's not so bad. 6:30 a.m. Where did he go? El Hamakom. He went to a place called Hamakom. Who would like to guess where is the place? Go for it. Tell. Rachel. Very good.
Where Beis Hamikdash.
Yes, the place is the Malka, is Malka. He goes to the place of the future Beis Hamikdash. Asher al Masham. From here we learn that tefillah you have to do standing. And then he adds the word as Pnei Hashem, which the rabbis explain. Pnei Hashem means that when you daven, you have to be facing God, which is another way of saying totally disconnect yourself from the physical world. And if you know what you're doing, you can reach a level called, in fancy Hebrew, hispashtus, hagashmius, literally disrobe yourself of your physicality, and you reach a stage that is very similar to prophecy. That is what Avraham Avinu does. He is unleashing the power of chakras. He is unleashing the power of legal tefillah, halachic tefillah until the end of time. He's creating this energy so that every single chakra until the end of the day plugs into this first chakra. This is huge, ladies. This is a very, very, very powerful tefillah. Continues the next pasuk and says, what came out of this? So we want to know. This is the first chakras ever. It's very exciting. This is the origin. This is the history of tefillah. This is what all begins. This is the foundation block for everything that will be in the future. So after his tefillah, let's say he davened for an hour. What made me say an hour? The Bible says that the ancients used to prepare for an hour, daven for an hour, and then take an hour to take 3 steps back. Another way of saying to land and get back to earth. They had to spend 3 hours on this prayer. So let's say he did this hour prayer, and then he lands, it takes another hour. It says, "Vayashkev al pnei stoim v'ameira, v'al chokei eretz hakika." He looks around, what today we call the Dead Sea Valley. He wants to see what happened to his prayers. Vayar, v'hinei, Allah, kita ha'aretz k'kita ha'kivshon. He sees a world on fire. He sees the crimson red of death and destruction from one end of the horizon to the other. He sees nothing except for sadness, nothing except for pain and tragedy. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has apparently answered the very first tefillah, the foundation of tefillah, with one big, emphatic niet. That's it. That's what's happening over here. It's a very, very, very disturbing opening chapter to the world of tefillah. Tefillah, from the greatest man, Avraham, at that greatest moment, the foundation of tefillah ends up in failure. Ends up that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says no. So let's talk about this for a moment. I have in front of me a newspaper with me, which is so old that Chana, who's holding the baby, I don't even know her married name, heard me teach this to her. This is over 10 years ago.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry to do this to you, but I told this to you whatever it was, before the Civil War or something like that. Okay.
which one?
Okay. The story goes that there was a tragedy. This is what we're talking about today, a tragedy of a young man who was murdered. I just said to Mrs. Rose beforehand, it's confusing. There's two types of tragedies that we've had recently. Sometimes the Kodesh Baruch Hu sets it up that we can daven for the person, and sometimes it sets it up that we cannot daven. So the three boys that were murdered in the summer, if you remember, it was crazy. They were already dead, but Klaiso was davening for another 2 weeks. It was like an incredibly bizarre and, in a way, beautiful, but tragic at the same time. The Klaiso was davening, there was a tremendous amount of tefillah, and they were already dead. And then you have a story like with Daniella, where everything happened so quickly, or with the Kedoshim of Ramot, where everything happened in seconds, so we don't get a chance to daven. But here, we had a chance to daven. The story was Nachshon waxing, which happened, this is now over 10 years ago. And you probably may have learned about it, you're probably too little, you were alive when it happened when you were little girls. This crazy story, they took an Israeli soldier, they gave a Friday night, midnight deadline. And everyone had a chance to daven. It was a frum boy, and the parents told everyone, Esther and Yehuda Waxman, please tonight make tefillah gatherings on our behalf. There was I in Hernof with thousands of people, I know thousands, hundreds of people. Black kippah, kippah sruga, streimelach, black hat, young, old, Ashkenazi, Sephardi. This is Klal Yisrael in all their beauty. We're davening for a simple thing. Hashem sent home a Yiddish boy to his mama. What's the big deal? The Israeli army is very good. Everything can be done like Teva, and we'll know that it came from our tefillos. Once again, Hashem says niet. It wasn't just it was a horrible, horrible no. He died, not only did he die, he was tortured. It was a horrible, horrible story that happened to him. And the press spoke to the father and asked him, well, let me just read this to you. I've asked the Kodesh Baruch Hu for so much. Yehuda Waxman repeats again and again to the media, to those who have come to comfort him, and to wonder whether or not the dashing of his hopes has made a crack in his emunah. I suffered from a disease since I was 16. I asked Hashem, let me raise a family, and the answer was yes. I asked for good, successful children, and the answer was yes. I asked for a good living, and the answer was yes. I asked for good health, and the answer was yes. So when people ask me, how is it that I and hundreds of thousands of others prayed for Nachshon and were not answered? The response is that we did receive an answer. The answer was no. A father has the right to sometimes tell his child no. Okay? It's a hard pill to swallow, but this is it. Kodesh Baruch Hu says no sometimes. The first time that we ever daven in history, Adam Avinu's tefillah, that's a bit much to say no at the very beginning. But I remember when I grew up in England, back in the old days, before I changed my accent. But we used to speak like this, you know what I mean? So back in the old days, I grew up in London, and I think I heard this first said to me in Yiddish. Because in Yiddish, it sounds good in Yiddish, you can't even translate it into English. I think I heard being taught, I'm saying Yiddish, and I'll try and translate it. The Eivish to Empfinish, name, the Eivish to Empfinish. Sounds good in Yiddish. The Eivish to Empfinish means HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't answer. Consider the Eivish to Empfa, he does answer, Nish, with a no. So it has that stool, it has that sounds good in Yiddish because it just flows. The Eivish to Empfinish, name, the Eivish to Empfinish, and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's answer with a no. That father has a right to answer with a no. So now, I'm going to tell you the reason why I'm standing in front of you tonight. I want to say something from the bottom of my heart. I want to say it as passionately and as forcefully as I can. This is a little bit of a holy war, a jihad for me, to teach this to the public, because this is information that most people don't know. And my source, the first time I heard it, is from an essay written by Rabbi Menachem Nissel, and it's a little booklet that he wrote in the name of his father, this idea, and you need to hear this idea, it's very important. And that is the following. This idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says no to our tefillot because a father has a right. Okay? Sometimes Abba says no. There's one small little problem with this phrase, that a father has a right to say no to our tefillot. And that small little problem is that it is simply not true. Sheker. Hashem always says yes to our tefillot. Period. There, I said it. Hashem always answers yes to our tefillot. So what are you thinking? Rabbi, I don't mean to be rude, but just the other day I davened for, I don't know, some good Jew, and the person died. So I know what you're talking about. You're here speaking about this particular case. You might know what she answered. You just told us these stories. What are you talking about? Throughout history, people daven, Hashem says no all the time. So what do you mean Hashem always says yes? The phrase Hashem says no to our tefillot creates the unhealthy image, as if that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is rejecting our tefillot. Let me explain to you with an example. When I'm looking in front of young ladies over here, most of you, if not all, have mastered the art of manipulating your fathers. It's in your bloodstream, just like it's in your father's bloodstream to be manipulated. You just know, every daddy, whenever my kids ask me for money, I always scream, "Mommy, hold my hand." I don't know how to answer these. I'm terrified of my teenage daughters. Anything I'm really scared of is when they ask for something, I always say yes. I don't know how to say no. I'm sure there's a way. Until the only thing I ever say is ask your mother. So, you go into your father. Okay, Daniella. What's your first name again? What? Dina. Dina goes into her father. The father's watching, Match the Day, Manchester United, and they're probably losing nowadays. Okay. What? Okay, Baruch Hashem. Okay. You see, she was doing it. Anyhow, so it comes in. Daddy watches the football. It says, "Father, I'd like to have the keys to the Lexus." So Daddy turns like crimson red and he starts to shake all over. And he says, I'm sorry, Dina, but I actually have a meeting tonight. I can't do a funny match that. But I have a meeting tonight, and I really need the car. Just going to have to borrow Mommy's wagon. Dina says, not cool. And she walks out. He's thinking, what a way. She complimented his tie, everything. He did all the famous moves. And total waste of time. And she can't believe the father said no. Or she said no. And it was a wasted effort. Totally wasted. That never happens with Hashem. With HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when you take your 3 steps and you ask him for something, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says yes, meaning I will take your request and I, God, will use it for the best possible usage based on what you asked for. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to look at you, I'm going to take that tefillah, and I'm going to ask myself, what's the best way to use this? But it's not like money that you just create tefillah and His Baruch is going to use it where He wants to purchase. No, He's going to take your will as part of the way that He processes what He does with your tefillah. I'm going to give you 4 examples, 4 levels over here, and this is basically explaining how His Baruch says yes. The first way that He says yes is that He says yes to what you said, how you said, exactly what you said. Every single great prayer story is based around this first thing. Sometimes we hear about miracles in the medical field. This is what happens. We hear incredible things. His Baruch says yes to our tefillah. It's just amazing. What happens? So let's see my mother-in-law, a blessed memory. She was very, very sick in a place called Memphis, Tennessee. It's where my wife is from. And you're from Memphis?
Nashville, but I went to school in Memphis.
We went to, so I took that.
Really?
Yeah, the Goldie, Margolian, I'm going to be there
That's
next Friday.
her school.
I'm going to be there next Friday. Oh yeah, next Shabbos I'm in Memphis. So you would take the 40 west and go for 2.5, yeah? That's it, to get from Nashville. You would. Speculating. What?
That's the first time I've heard that in this country.
Sure as that, Nashville. Okay. You know Rabbi Posa Jr.?
Yeah.
Okay. I better stop this because he's about to pass out. Anyhow, so you go there, and what happens? So you probably know the hospital I'm about to describe. You know the Baptist Memorial East? It's right corner there, going up the road, and you say, anyhow, so my mother was in that hospital, and it's like crazy. She's like, the doctors call my wife up, and they say, your mother has like 48 hours to live max. Get on the plane and be there as soon as possible. So I'm driving my wife to the airport and going over whatever the halachas, the rules of what to do when someone dies. That's it. She's going to say goodbye to her mom. She's going to catch her before she dies. And what happened is that Motzei Shabbat, I remember I called up the hospital, and I explained to the nurse that, in Israel, the Sabbath is over. We want to know how Big Mom is doing. I used to call her Big Mom. It's not particularly nice. The sound is okay. I said, how's Big Mom doing? And she says, well, I sure can't tell how Big Mom is doing, but I sure can tell y'all there's been a lot of praying down yonder. Because apparently the whole shul came down, and they all there was a whole dominant vigil going on just outside my mother-in-law's room. And then, at some point in the afternoon, the doctor comes from another department. He was Jewish, he happened to know my mother-in-law, and he wants to keep checking. And he says, this woman's about to die. Why don't we just change her medicine and do something completely radical and different? Who knows? This doctor, my mother-in-law called my angel, because she lived, Baruch Hashem, to go on to a bunch of, a bunch of mitzvahs and weddings. She lived another 5-6 years, then or after that. And this was it. We felt in our blood the power of tefillah. So that's category number 1. I get little tastes of this all the time. Whenever I travel, I always have mini miracles. When you daven, that you should sit next to someone hygienic. So there's all kinds of miracles that happen to me. So now, that's category 1. That's the easy category. Category number 2 is going to be new for all of you, except for Chana, who's heard the Shiur before. You probably forgot. But category number 2 is Perek Tesvav of the Sefer Beis Elokim, written by the Mabit. The Mabit was a contemporary of the Arizal in Shvat, from that Chaver over there, 500 years ago. He wrote this awesome Sefer in tefillot, and he writes the following. He says, sometimes you get your answer to your tefillah, which is not exactly what you asked for. But in his words, it's b'doyim l'mashe b'kasha. It's so close to what you got that you understand fully that what you got is because you davened for the other thing, which means that sometimes that whatever you ask for shidduchim, and Hashem says no because you asked stupidly for this particular guy. And then you realize afterwards, you get the next guy, and you realize afterwards he was so much better for you. So you realize, oh wow, that's amazing. There's even a country song. Sometimes I ask the Lord for our hands and prayers. You should know this. It's a classic country song by what's his name? Guy, I like
Jimmy
him
Buffett.
because he wore black hats.
Jimmy Buffett.
Hey, the point about the song,
No,
basically it was a classic country music type thing. He fell in love with his high school flame, and she rejected him, and then like 10 years later, he's happily married and he sees her, and in the words of the song, she's not the one that I remember her to be, which is probably country talk, but now she's fat and ugly. It's like the whole thing. Then you'll think, category number 2, you ask for something and you get something very close to what you got. I believe, he doesn't say this, this also includes when you realize instantly that what you asked for, Hashem, you missed the plane, and the plane crashes, which is a well-known phenomena that sometimes you miss something and you realize how lucky you were that you missed it. The point is, category number 2 is sometimes you realize how Hashem has, so to speak, taken your tefillot. Because Hashem always takes your tefillot, and he figured out what's the best way of using it. I want you to know that in the Nachshon Waxman story, something awesome happened because I found out by chance, because a friend of mine did a Shiva call on the last day of the Shiva, when the Israeli commander unit that went in to save him, they popped by. And Yehoshua Falik, which was Nachshon's father, said, I want to know what happened when you went in. When you went in to save my son. You can imagine Israeli commandos, these are like these tough guys. These guys are professionals. They're the best of the best of the best. And Hashem, and Yehuda said, what happened? He said, I want you to know that every single one of us should have been dead. Every single one of us should have been dead. He said that it was insane that we had no element of surprise. The place was booby-trapped. They were waiting for us. They should have come. They should have killed us the moment we came in. But for some reason, the bullets that we shot were successful, and the bullets that they shot were not successful. And one of them said, this button on my fatigue saved my life. So what are you talking about? He says, this is what he said. He said, the bullet was supposed to go into my heart. It hit the metal on my button, and it made it graze across my chest. I have a chest graze, and a cut over here from this bullet, but it didn't go in. It didn't go into the heart chamber. Why not? Because of this button. And Yehuda Waxman exclaimed the following thing. This is a tremendously brave statement. He said, this whole week I've been wondering, hundreds of thousands of tefillos, all the tefillos across the road for my son, what happened to these tefillos? I have no idea, but at least I know that part of them were used to save the life of you soldiers. At least I can see a partial machama that the tefillos were used to save the lives of the soldiers. Okay, that's category number 2. Category number 3 is something that Chaim Kanievsky says in the name of his father, the disciple. But I heard it first from my Rebbe, Rabbi Shlomo Volba Zatzal, Rabbi Volba the Ali Shar. He writes, I don't know if he writes this, I heard it from him. He says very beautifully, he says, we know something interesting happened 100 years ago. 100 years ago, there were thousands and thousands of young men and women that left East Europe to go to America. Probably the people in this room to whom the story applies. What happened? Jews left Russia, maybe Russia. There was a poem with Dwayne, maybe Russia. They came to America, and the parents said to the children before they left, please keep Shabbos, keep kosher, because America in those days was a spiritual graveyard. And the kids would get on the boat, and the parents would start, like Rivka and Yitzchak, they would go to each corner and they would cry tears. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, do not make our kids a statistic. We don't want them to go up the derech. They would get a telegram, and the telegram would say, hey, the mama, hey, the Holy Mother and Father, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we couldn't find a job without working on Shabbos. Parents are devastated. They can't believe this is happening. This is like the worst news. But it's going to get worse, because they get another letter. And this other second telegram says, we thought about it a lot, but we decided to give our children a chance in this country. We're sending them to public school, to non-Jewish school. This happened in literally tens of thousands. What happened is people like Seder night. First generation is the Chacham, the second generation is the Rasha, the third generation is the Tam. They just see pictures of the grandparents, and the fourth generation is Sheina Dale Israel. They're already assimilated. They go to public school in Nashville. They have no idea what's going on anymore. They go to White Station in Memphis, and whatever. It's all these places. It's like, don't blow. I lived there for 2 years. It's okay. This is it. This is what happened. And somehow or other, out of nowhere, Hakadosh Baruch Hu allows it several generations later, out of nowhere, maybe in why. Ishitur, Sameach, Chabad, who knows? Maybe in a college campus, a representative of some care organization, somehow or other, these people make it back home. Could be here in this room. There's someone in this room who has a lot of relatives your age that don't have the schus to learn Torah. You raise your hand for, you want to contribute something?
No, it's me.
Okay, so that was what he
My mom's great-grandmother came over from Russia, and my brothers and I are the only ones in my generation on mom's side of the family that are Desi.
What's your name?
Zippy Spander.
Wow. Zippy or Zippy?
Are you Israeli?
The first name, yeah. I'm letting you want to be.
Zippy.
What?
Zippy.
Zippy, okay, so I just want you to know that I'm happy you said this, because the point that Rabbi Revolta said is that don't think that the reason why you're sitting here is by chance. Don't think it's a statistical improbability. Know that Kadosh Baruch Hu took those tefillot of your great-great-grandparents and held on to those tears, one generation, two generations, for a reason that we don't know, and said that now, in 2015, those tears are to be taken out for you. You should know that nothing happened to you by chance. Everything was with a plan. Because Baruch Hu says, now is the time for you to be in your Shalim or HaKadosh to study Torah. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. It's an incredible thing. It's the most amazing thing to know that someone out there is always looking out for us, a grandparent, a great-grandparent. And those tefillot are never, ever lost. Those tefillot are always there for us. And the fourth category is the most important category of them all, and the hardest for us to relate to. And that is what's called the essence of our emunah. What does it mean, the essence of our emunah? The Jew believes that somehow or other there are forces in life that we don't understand. We look at our lives, we see what goes on, and we have questions. We have questions, so to speak, against God. What is Hashem thinking? What is going on in this world? Why is everything so crazy? Why are there so many tragedies? Why do children have to die young? Some of you may be going to Poland. Anyone going to Poland? Maybe you're going to be confronted with this crazy questions. I'm telling you now that there's going to be a time when Mashiach's going to come. And according to our tradition, Eliyahu Novi is going to come with him. And his job is to sit everyone down and to explain to them how every single tefillah and every single heartfelt tear was used for the most important possible usage. And we are going to be so blown away by what Eliyahu Novi is going to teach us that we're going to start laughing. That is the great laughter at the end of days. That's the Oz, Yimale, Schek, Pino that we say in Shir Hamalos before we bench to tell us that we believe that one day there's going to be the great laugh. He said, I can't believe it. I can't believe what Hakadosh Baruch Hu done. That's what we hear. This is going to be that moment when answers are given to all our big questions. Like I said beforehand, we're here tonight mourning a young lady. It's like crazy. Where do you begin? So we believe in Gilgul. Gilgul means reincarnation. It's a very hard concept to relate to. Because Baruch Hu says, okay, I'm bringing you back. I'm going to give you whatever, 20 plus years. You're going to have to achieve this and the other, and then I'm bringing you back upstairs again. So we believe in these things. How does it work? No idea. Why does it happen? No idea. But Baruch Hu sees from the beginning of time to the end of time on the Shamas. And we believe, with a strong belief, Hatsur Tamim Pa'alo, the rock, Baruch Hu, the one that cannot be moved, Tomer, everything he does is perfect. We just aren't ready to understand yet how it works, but we know that it's there. This is the essence of our belief. So let me summarize what I said over here. I brought down 4 categories of how Hashem says yes. Number 1, he says yes to what we say, how we say, exactly what we wanted, we get what we want, even if it's statistically impossible. Number 2, we get what we want similar to what we asked for, but in a way we can see the connection. Number 3, like zippy over here, it takes a while until we see how Baruch Hu runs the show. But when we see it, we understand that it could not have happened in a vacuum. These are the tefillot of the early generations. This is payday for those early tefillot. And the 4th, Emunah does not mean the stories have happy ending. Emunah means that we know that there's a big picture. The essence of our faith is that we trust Hashem, that there's a big picture going on over here. Which brings me full circle. Because I started my shiur by talking about a man called Avram Avinu. And the extraordinary disappointment of seeing how the first tefillah comes crashing down with the terrible, terrible, terrible defeat of everything Avram Avinu was trying to do. Remember, we read together that Avram Avinu takes his 3 steps back, he looks at the Dead Sea Valley, and he sees fire, and he sees brimstone, and he sees the color of death everywhere. He can see from one end of the horizon to the other. Says Rabbi Menachem Nissel that in the corner of his eyes, he sees a teeny little spark of light. What is the spark of light? Spark of light created out of his tefillos. What happened to that little spark? So we're talking about stones. We're already used to it. This is disgusting. This is the vile story of Lot having an incestual relationship with his daughters. Somehow, what came out of that ensuing disgusting episode, a little baby that would hold on to that spark. And that little baby, his name was Moab. My daddy is my grandpa. Moab says, Gematria 49. You feel at home right there. Okay, this is like the South. Okay, so this is like, sorry, what's not right. Okay, this is the story where Moab is Gematria 49. All 49 levels of tumor, of evil, are found in this one child. He is this decrepit, orc-like creature, this lowly, vile little human being called Moab, who has this little spark deep down inside of him. And he passes it from one wretched generation to the next, until an extraordinary woman by the name of Ruth HaMoabiyah, takes that spark out for the first time. And a few generations later, the great-great-great-great-grandson, David Melch, turns into a flame, and his son Shlomo Melch ignites it even further as he builds the first base of Mikdash. And all this comes from that little light. Unfortunately, we were not worthy. Unfortunately, that spark had to go into hiding for now 2,500 years. But this is the essence of our belief, says Rabbi Menachem, that spark will be brought out, hopefully very, very soon, with the coming of the Melech Mashiach. Who is Mashiach? Mashiach is the son of Shlomo and David, who's the son of Ruth, who's the son of Moab, who's the son of that spark, created out of that failed tefillah of Avram Avinu. But when it comes out at the end of days, what is Avram Avinu going to do? What is Mashiach going to do? He's going to go back to Stein. But not just Stein, he's going to go to all the 4 corners of the world, all the Stein-like places. California, and Miami, and Manhattan. Not Manchester. Maybe London. They'll go to any place that he sees decadence. And he's going to makar them back. And he's going to bring them to tshuva. And guess what, ladies? Hashem has answered yes to Avram Avinu's first tefillah. It just took him a few thousand years to get there. But when he said yes, it was Ara saved, not just dying, but the whole universe is saved. The whole Tikkun Olam comes from the Melave Malka. So what is my point? The point is that you and I can never ever stop doubting. You and I can never stop giving up hope. You and I can never think, because Baruch Hu, you're disappointing me, because we don't see this big picture. You have to find deep reserves of emunah and belief in Bilbo, whatever it is, all these different concepts to try and understand that somehow or other Baruch Hu has a plan for everything. And don't think that when Nashon Waxman went up to Shemayim, there were not hundreds of thousands of angels greeting him that came out of her tefillos. And don't think that when someone says the doctors have given up, the person is in an advanced state of cancer. You say, what should I daven for? The doctors have given up. You don't give up. Your tefillah can take away pain. Your tefillah can lengthen his life with precious seconds. Your tefillah is good for you, but most of it is good for the nifter. It's good for that person. You don't know what you're doing with those tefillahs in the higher world. You don't know what you're achieving. You never, ever give up with tefillah. You always talk to Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu is going to keep you close, and you have to keep him close. And tefillah is that medium. That's how we converse. That's how we make that connection. So as we conclude this memorial share after 1 year, for those who actually knew her in this room, who knew her, so this woman was an inspiration, was incredible. Everyone who knew her had to love her. She was a person that had chesed in her heart. She was a caring. She was a Tomer Devorah superstar. She was everything that is good about seminaries and Torah and what we produce. Clients who are the most finest. Why did Hashem do what He did? We don't know. Do we know that there's a reason? Do we know that it has to be exactly this way? That we trust. That is the faith that we have in the Baruch Hu. That there's a bigger picture that we are not yet able to see. Until then, I end the way we began. I remind you that you are the Chabura. You are the Tomer Devorah and Tizwai. You are the friends. It is your achrayus not to take these things lightly, to ask yourselves, what can I do more? What can I do in her memory? How can I make sure that even though physically she's not with us, that her spirit stays with us? What are the small little things I can take? And remember, the smaller they are, the more likely they are that they will stay with you. But you have to try and be consistent. You try to be realistic. You take on these small little, teeny little things, and you see what a schus it is. With Niftaris and Be'ez Hashem, we should all be Zocha and Meheri Yameinu. When Mashiach comes and takes that little spark that Avinu created, and he lights up the universe from one end of the world to the other with the beauty of the Torah and the beauty of everything that is good about this world, know that it came from that first tefillah of Avinu. And then afterwards, we'll be able to debate in the laughter of Mashiach and Yoel Navi, see how all our questions are answered. And we'll be zeicher to enjoy that moment we hear of Yom.
Amazing.